This one, camera number 6, has been murdered, good meter, which has obviously been stolen since the note was written. Good transfer shaft, etc. Shame about the mirror setting stuff. So we don't know much about the state of the shutter. You can see the blades are partly closed there. The back catch has been thumped so it doesn't want to swing open easily. And there's the capping plate sitting at a funny angle. It's not a good look. I'll start opening it up from the top, and once I've got it in pieces I'll show you what's happening. Well, it might have had a good meter, but there's no cord on there, and what's more, this screw is loose, so that's not good. I'll remove the prism so we can have a look inside the mirror box and see what's going on. Well, the mirror's down, but it's pushed right back past its normal stop. Which suggests that somebody's poked something through the front here and pushed it back. Alright, I'll carry on. As I dig my way into this camera, stripping it down, there's no cocking rack. That's unusual, of course, and unexpected, and it might have some bearing on why things didn't seem to move. Time for the big reveal, I suppose. Let's get the front off this. I've pretty much got everything else out of the body. And find out what's going on. We know there's no cocking rack. That can't have disappeared all by itself, so someone's had that out. Almost inevitably there's something going on with that cord from the meter. We don't know whether that broke of its own accord or whether that was killed. Let's lift the front off. It seems to be stuck. Okay, it's just a spring on the front cam is caught behind the flash wire. That's better. See, so the flash wire is sitting out at a funny angle. That wouldn't have helped. Anyway, what we're interested in is what's going on in the body. Now, all of the washers are here, I think. The cord's broken, as you can see. I'll do a bit of a head count and find out how many washers we've got in a second. They don't look to be a full complement. We got 3, 6, 9. No, we've got all the washers. That's the red herring. Okay, so the flash cord drum, the cord drum's come off. Here's our cord, or what's left of it. Just unhook that spring. So we've got a little bit of the cord left. Not much. Here's another bit. That's the knot. It should have been up around the drum. It shouldn't have been anywhere near there, so that tells me that somebody has twisted that cord up, possibly from the top, pulling on it and buggered things up. So let's see what we've got here. Okay, it's a bit of a mess. This post here is this lever should be attached to that post. That's the lever that holds the mirror in place. I'll just remove the cam. This is the front cam. It looks to have a full complement of teeth, so that hasn't broken. Here's the rear cam. This is broken. There's a tooth broken on the cam here, and the one next to it's not looking that smart. So that means that would be incapable of setting the mirror correctly, or possibly even cocking the shutter correctly. But this business here, this is interesting. I'm not sure how you'd go about achieving that if you wanted to. That post that this arm on, this latch is on a post and it's adjustable. You use that for adjusting the mirror position so that your image in the finder coincides with the image at the film plane. Now there's a lock screw and an adjustment screw here. In order to get this thing disconnected from there, normally you'd have had to undo those. Someone hasn't done that, so this must have had an awful lot of force applied to it because it doesn't want to go back in place. This lever is jammed in the down position, it won't return to the top. Oh, this lever here, this one at the back, which sets the capping plate, is bent. So that arm is bent. It's unable to move probably up or down. Yeah, I just pushed it back. Okay, so it's popped up now. So that's the lever that would set the capping plate. This is the lever that would set the mirror. We know that the cam has lost a tooth at the back, and there's no cocking rack, so we don't know what the state of the cocking rack was like. That cord on the meter, that couldn't have happened by itself. That level of damage, where that cord was positioned, it must have been wound up from the top. So somebody's moved things about to cause that problem, I think. But this mirror, this mirror being jammed down here, it's also jammed underneath that lever. It should be sitting on top of that lever. The corner of the mirror is broken away down here, so it's been pushed back past this screw head, and that's broken the corner off that mirror. Alright. It's sitting on underneath this lever when it should be sitting on top. I hold that back. Can I get that past there? Right, so mirror's popped up. This lever is out of position. It looks bent. So it's been forced. One way or another it's been forced across. The capping plate moves, the mirror moves. We know that the setting lever for the capping plate was bent. I pushed it back up straight, but it's unlikely to be a permanent fix doing things like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen this screw here and lift out or raise the post that this sits on with a view to getting this back in the slot here where it belongs. And then I can check the mirror activating stuff and see if it all otherwise appears to work. Well, this is the lock screw here. Back that off. It's not exactly moving freely. Take that lock screw out completely. It's just a little dog, basically, a little dog screw. That's going nowhere. Oh, it's moving, I think. Yeah, it's coming out. Alright, let's see if I can wriggle that arm into that slot. Yeah, that's it. And push that post back into place. And I'll put its little dog screw in there to hold it in place. If I can find it in my container of random parts. I threw it in here with all these bits I'm planning on cleaning. And of course, one little dirty object in amongst a whole lot of other dirty little objects is hard to find. Back shortly. Okay, I found that screw and got it back in position. Let's see if the capping plate will drop down into position. That would latch in position there if the spring was on at the bottom position, which I've just pushed that back by myself, and this should drop down and it would normally latch into position as the arm on the mirror here hits the lever below it, hits this lever, which allows the latch to lift up here and drop this in place. This latch is not dropping into position. Should sit like that, and this will come down. That's right, and it's latched in place normally. Okay, that looks at least like it's got the potential to work. That would release the mirror, and as the mirror comes up, that would free up this capping plate, which would have been released by the arm on the back of the shutter. So the stuff here is not irretrievably done for. Now, yes, you can see there, there's a few scratches on that mirror. Now, they're fairly sharp scratches. They didn't get there by themselves. Someone's poked something through the front of the camera to achieve that. Presumably when that mirror was pushed back too far beyond its natural stop. The capping plate would normally come down. It would latch at this point at the bottom here. There's a spring that comes up through the base of the camera that activates that catch, and the mirror comes down, that post hits that arm, it latches this into position. So my mirror is missing a tiny chip of glass in the corner, which of course is not enough to adversely affect anything in terms of the use of the camera. Yeah, this arm here is not moving very freely. It's got a little return spring on it. It's just a little bit sticky. But the mirror's got plenty of go on the spring, there's no problem there. This tab on the side that you might be able to see, if I can get it in the right light, there's a tab in here. The mirror is supposed to come down as a flap on the side of the mirror. That's supposed to come in and hit that tab. It can't go any further than that tab. This tab was down below that point. Alright, so I think we can see what's been going on in the body there. Something is broken. Certainly a tooth on the transfer shaft is broken. The cocking rack we don't know about because it's not present. What about the shutter itself? Well, this flash contact is not tucked down neatly. It should be tucked down well out of the way, so this wire is well out of the way. It wasn't, which means when somebody serviced this camera last time they were a bit slack about doing that, and you can tell it had been serviced because there's no black paint on this flash wire here. It's normal for there to be some black paint on there to you don't want shiny things in inside your mirror box. Right, I've got a cocking transfer shaft here. I'm going to see if this shutter will cock. That's fully cocked in that position. We release the shutter and allow this to unwind. It's not going anywhere. It's up against the stop? No, it's not. It hasn't got there. The shutter hasn't started to move. So there's a fault inside the shutter as well. That's interesting. Okay. So we've got a fault in the shutter. We've certainly got faults in the body. When I suggested in my note this has been murdered, that was a pretty accurate statement, I think, looking at that. Now that we're into it, you can see what's going on inside. I wonder whether these rings at the front are misplaced. That's a possibility. That screw was loose. Now that's instantly suspicious. Something is causing the shutter to be completely jammed. It doesn't want to release at all. Let's remove the front rings. These rings are placed correctly compared to each other. This is a problem. You see that tab is bent. That's not at 90 degrees. Means that this whole ring has been twisted by somebody forcing that, and that would stop that ring from rotating, and stopping that ring from rotating would prevent the shutter from firing. Of course, that doesn't mean that that's what caused this shutter to fail to move, because this camera's been abused. It's got far more than its natural fault. That whatever caused the problems with the camera originally, its natural ailment, if you like. There's far more than that going on here. Here, with those front rings removed, I can run this down. It goes all the way across. If I lift up that lever, the rack can move further and the shutter's running. There you go. So the shutter does go. That was not the original fault. Misplacement of these rings on the front of the camera, this one in particular, has been mutilated. That tab is bent. It's no longer at 90 degrees, which means that the whole thing is distorted and therefore it wouldn't run when you release the shutter. So there's no serious problem with the shutter itself. It will certainly need servicing. They always do. After all, the camera's about 60 years old. This spring, I can probably straighten that up. Get that ring dead flat so it moves smoothly, and we can say that the shutter's a goer, potentially. And the body, well, we're in for a new cam transfer shaft because it's got a broken tooth. We need a cocking rack because the cocking rack's not present. And whether that was damaged at the same time that the transfer shaft was damaged, we don't know. This business of the mirror being pushed back well beyond its stop, that's not natural. There's no mechanism here in the camera that would allow that to happen by itself. Someone has had to have done that, and I think they've done that by pushing through the open shutter on that mirror and pushing it back forcefully. And why would you do that? It's anyone's guess. They're probably trying to clear the blockage. Okay, so here we've got problems with these levers being bent. Now the one at the back, that certainly had problems there. That was bent well out of line, and you saw me push it back into place slightly. But this little roller on here and the one behind it, they should be in a straight line with each other, and clearly they're not. The one at the back is pushed this way. Now that would mean that when the cam hits it, it's likely to push it in that direction. Instead of its motion being straight up and straight down, it's going to be, the forces will be in this direction, and that will tend to push that shaft even further out of alignment, and it's likely to jam up. Now I had a look at the one in front of it. That also appears to be slightly bent, so that I would say that both of those ones are damaged. Possibly this front one too, but I'm not so sure about that. So they're going to have to come out and be swapped. So I'll strip them down and we'll see how we go. So if the lighting looks a bit funny, it's because I've got a lamp here coming in from the side to try and cast some light down in that hole, because otherwise it's like the black hole of Calcutta down there. I can talk about it and point at things, but it's just like looking at a black cat in a coal cellar. Right. Let's get into stripping these levers out of the camera. Before you start taking the levers out here, it's worth taking a very close look at the position of the springs here. There are 3 shafts coming through from the bottom of the camera. Each of them has springs underneath this bracket, and the springs are not always exactly the same, so you need to know which spring goes where. This one here appears to be a coarser spring than the one behind it. What else can we note here? The spring here, it's probably worth unhooking that and not springing it off into space like I nearly did. Putting that carefully to one side, because that spring is very easy to dislodge, and once it goes, you're going to have a hard job replacing it if you can't find it. or if it gets damaged. Okay, so taking this lot apart, we need to get into the back of the camera. This can only be done if all the film advanced stuff is out of the camera. The take-up spool is normally here, the sprocket shaft is normally here, and here are the two screw heads that you can just about see there if I get the light a bit more useful, and they've got to be loosened off. They in turn hold this plate in place, and that plate guides those three rods. So I'll start by removing those two screws. Here's one of them. This is probably the second most awkward job you can be doing on a reflex, shifting these things out. The more awkward job is replacing the mirror or the capping plate. So the springs are no longer holding, the screws are no longer holding this bracket in place. So I can probably slide that bracket down and wriggle it out. There's the bracket. You can see it's got guiding slots here and here. You can also see that they're probably quite sticky looking with old grease. So we'll start with the front bracket here. Now this is hooked in to this arm, and we may or may not be able to wriggle it off there easily. Not today. Okay. So what I want to do is lift this arm out. Talked about this before. There's a locking screw here, and then the whole thing pushes out. Okay, that's just pushed out enough that now this has come off its spring. See if I can wriggle it off the arm here. Yeah, I can. Okay, so note we've got a washer on the end of that arm, and take note of the springs. So here's our spring from the front shaft. I'll put that carefully there. The second arm, that's this one here, that has a spring on its shaft, this one here, and that's a lighter gauge than the first one. And at the back, this one here, this sets the capping plate, that also has a spring, and its spring is the same in this case as the one from the middle shaft. Alright, so we've got them out of the bodies. I'll just put this body aside, we'll have a look at the levers. Okay, so here's the one from the back. This is the one that operates the capping plate. And if I hold a steel rule up next to that, you'll see that it's not straight. See how it diverges at the top, it's pushed in. So the bend starts right about here, and this whole thing's canted over that way. I can see it better in this direction. So it's got a twist on it as well. But you can probably see that that's twisted away. So that's out of shape. Can you straighten these things up? Yes. It's awkward trying to get them dead straight so that they'll move freely. And because they've been bent once, they're probably a bit weak and they're more likely to get pushed out of line. So this piece is certainly bad. This piece, this is the piece that sets the mirror. Now, I looked at this in the camera, and the tip of it, this piece here, this little stepped piece here, that's supposed to bear on this tiny roller section here. There's a little roller there, a little round piece. This is the tip of that is supposed to bear on that little round piece, but in practice this is pushed out of line. This is too far this way, and so instead of bearing on that little wheel, it bears on the frame of the mirror itself, which is incorrect. So I know that this piece is also bent. And yes, I can see it looking down on it this way. It's certainly bent. It's probably about, I don't know, 0.25 of a millimetre this way out at the end. The same thing. Because it's been bent once, even if we could get it straightened out, it's probably got some weakness to it. Now this is from the front. This is the piece that actually releases the mirror action. And this here too, this appears bent to me. It's not as bad, it would probably work, but that's also bent. So those three arms are all bent. So I've got some replacements here because I've got a good selection of spare parts. So let's start. This one here. This is the piece that would set the capping plate. As you can see, this is a new and unused part. I've got quite a few of these parts. Now, the way these parts tended to be supplied in the past was small camera parts were often sold as 5s or 10s. So if people were ordering spare parts, they didn't just order from Eastman, Kodak, whatever the part number of this is, which in this case I think is N4657. They wouldn't have ordered one N4657, they probably got a packet of 5. And probably not 10, but they may even have got a packet of 10. And that would have been in the sure and certain hope that there were going to be 4 more cameras with the same problem coming over their workbenches at some stage in the next couple of years, and they'd be able to use those parts up to good effect. In practice, what happened, of course, was a lot of repairers, particularly smaller ones, would buy their packet of 5 parts, they'd use one to do the job at hand, and the other 4 would languish in the shelves till doomsday, basically, until they all managed to gather themselves up here at the other side of the world. So that's why I've got a lot of spare parts for things that you hardly ever replace. So anyway, we'll have one of these. And the other piece, the next one in the chain, oh, here's a bad one. Look at that one there. You can see the bend on that one. No problem at all. That's a very good example of a bad piece. That's just sitting in my spares and hasn't been sorted. Let's find a new and unmolested one. That one there, that looks good. So that's our piece for setting the mirror and our piece for setting the capping plate. And at the front, for that release there at the front, let's just make sure these parts have done the rounds and they've been rattling around in parts boxes for half a century. So some of them aren't as pretty as they once were, but here's a good release lever. So I can fit these 3 good pieces in place of those bent pieces, and there's a very good chance that this will all work nicely afterwards. At least that's the hope. While we've got it at this stage, where we've basically just got not much more than the mirror and the capping plate in place, I want to address this mirror. I've said that the fact that it was chipped at the front is probably not going to be a major issue for us. But something that is an issue is this. The mirror is held in place. It sits in the tray, and there's two little brackets here and here which stop the mirror from being able to float in the tray. This one's a bit chipped now, and I'm concerned that the mirror might move forward as it flaps up. So I want to see if the mirror is loose in its tray. It certainly can move forward a little bit, and ideally I'd like that all the way back in its tray at all times. So what I'm going to do is take the mirror out, put a little tiny drop of adhesive underneath the mirror and put it back in place. Push it to the back of its position and let that adhesive set. If this mirror floats to any large extent, if it floats forward because it's no longer retained correctly at the front here, what can happen is it can scuff in the front plate here and cause the mirror, the whole action, not to work correctly, because the mirror doesn't swing up smoothly as it should do, and so you end up with a chain reaction of things not happening as well as you'd like. So it's fairly important that that mirror doesn't float about. The mirror, there are two little springs either side of that mirror that hold it in place. I'll remove these little buffer pads that are sitting here at the moment, if they'll come off for me. Because they're in my way. They're just glued in place. We can put them back afterwards. You can see the spring here. This will lift up. So if I slide under that mirror, you'll see it lifts up from the tray, and hopefully I can slide it forward out of the tray, put some adhesive there and slide it back. So let me work on that. Now, glass being glass, it chips easily, so I'm just going to use a toothpick behind that rear edge of the mirror and slide my scalpel underneath the glass at the front to lift it clear of those brackets, and I should be able to lift that mirror right out of the tray. Okay, so now it's sliding forward. It's lifted above the two little brackets at the corners. I can slide that thing forward. And now I can put a little drop of adhesive here and here on that tray and push that mirror back into place. Right, this is just some contact adhesive. It's the stuff I use for sticking back the Leatherettes and similar tasks. And put a drop in there. A drop in there. Pulling that away carefully so I don't drag a tail of glue over the surface of the mirror, and I'll slide that mirror back into place. Okay, so that's back in place. I've got a little blob of adhesive there which I'd rather not have. See if I can encourage that to go away. That'll do. So that mirror is now pushed firmly back to the back of its tray. When the adhesive sets, and it'll only take a few minutes to set up, that mirror will no longer be likely to shuffle forward and cause me problems. These components all now need to be cleaned to get rid of any old grease and dust and rubbish that it's picked up. And likewise in the body here needs to be cleaned, and the rods where the springs run and where the arms run up and down on those rods, that needs to be cleaned too for the same reason. So I'll just clean those off camera with a bit of naphtha and cotton buds. This piece, this has got the control levers on it. This also guides our rods. This is the one off the camera. I've just cleaned this now and I'm inspecting it. Now, this arm here, that's the arm that this rod on the side of the mirror bears on as the mirror is dropping down. That looks to be slightly bent, which doesn't surprise me because we know that the mirror had been forced past its normal position. So this lever's it's got a bit of a twist in it. It's rotated this way. So that's suspect. At this end, at the other end of the same lever, this tip looks slightly bent too. And the other lever looks okay. Now, I've got one lonely replacement part here, new replacement I believe, in my spare parts boxes. And I can use this as a guide to checking that I've got this piece straightened up correctly. I don't believe I'm going to have to use my spare part. I think that this piece will probably do the job for me, but I do need to make sure that that is bent back so it's sitting at the right angle. The way it's twisted at the moment, I believe it might rub on the other arm and cause us problems. So that's my next task, is to get the pliers and bend this back until I'm satisfied that it's like I bought one. Well, as you can see, I've got all that stuff back in the camera and working. The electric in, the mirror with wires. It loads up again nicely. Capping plate works. Levers seem to move very smoothly. And I've done that off camera because I need to rehearse, because it's not something I do very frequently, this task. I haven't done it for a few years. And now I can lead you through the process of how to go about doing this. So I will strip that stuff back out to the same stage you last saw things at, and we'll go from there. Now, for convenience of working here, I'm going to remove the back door. So take those 3 hinge screws out. That's because you'll have the back door flapping while you're busy trying to get the screws in, and that's a bit tedious, so you can do without it. So we've taken the back off. Now, this shield here, there are 2 screws down in here and here. They're a bit hard to get to, but you can get to them. I'll just get those loose. You can probably work around this, but it's easier if you don't. Just having trouble seeing that because it's that whole black cat in a coal cellar business all over again. Okay, got that out with its 2 screws. This piece, I'd remove that completely. So just undo the lock screw here and just slide that out. When I say slide out, it doesn't exactly fall out by itself, but it'll wriggle out. So what's that leave us? Leaves us all pretty much stripped down. You can see a bit of tape here at the bottom of the camera. I put that spring back in here that holds the capping plate latch. This latch here, that's the spring for that latch. I put that spring back in place and put a piece of tape there to hold it in place. That's what would normally, the base of the camera, base plate of the camera would normally do that job. So now we've just got nothing in the way of controls. We've just got our mirror and capping plate floating, and we can go through the business of reassembling this. Okay, piece by piece. We'll start with the spring. This is the one right at the back. It's tricky to get on because you've got to get past that little clamp, that catch with the cover. That's alright, it's on there now. Here's the arm. I'm taking some molybdenum paste. Run some through the hole. A light wipe on the back surface and the front surface. Just a light wipe. This goes in this way round. So I'll get that over the post. Yeah, it's just sitting over the post now on top of that spring. Then we want this piece. There's 2 slots in here, a wide one and a narrow one. The narrow one goes to the back. The narrow one goes round this lever that we've just fitted in place. There are 2 screw holes in the side of the case here that we took the screws out from earlier. So I want to get this seated over that bracket and hold it in place with my finger, flip the thing over and try and line up the screw holes from the back. I think I've got something there. I'll get one of the long screws, get it started, and amazingly it went in straight away. That's the power of rehearsal, because when I did it while I was working my way through all this, I couldn't get it to go. Can I get the second screw to start? It's not starting. Why not?